Welcome back to the Badger247 show, part of the 247 Sports Network. Once again, I'm Matt Perkins, joined as always by Badger247.com writers John McNamara and Nick Osen. So great to see you guys as always here on a Friday like we do it. Big game for the Badgers this coming weekend at Michigan. Coming off of a bye week, and before that, two pretty tough losses to Maryland and Alabama. Vibes right now, not exactly the best there in Madison. Still waiting on some injury updates. John, what's the latest on injuries to starting quarterback Billy Edwards, Jake Renfro? Who do we expect to see this weekend? Who do we not expect to see this week? And we know Preston Zachman's going to be out, but any other key guys that we know are going to be out?
Yeah, I was going to say, I think the only one we're for sure about is Preston Zachman, because Luke Fickell confirmed that on Monday. Beyond that, I think that Renfro could go. I think I feel maybe a little bit better about him than QB1 Billy Edwards. I don't, with as much as he talked about, when I say Luke Fickell talked about protecting him from himself, and then we didn't do that. I don't know then that you can put him out there against Michigan with what he was talking about on Monday. But look, I suppose anything can happen, but I would fully expect it to be, Danny O'Neal taking the bulk of those reps. I know that some fans have talked themselves into Hunter Simmons, and look, I think when you're trying to draw whatever positivity you can, a lot of times that comes with the backup quarterback, who sometimes is the most popular guy on campus. But I think it's going to be Danny O'Neal. It'd be a huge boost if you have a healthy Jake Renfro there that doesn't fix everything that ails that position group, but I certainly think it's a step forward. So if he's able to go, that's a big boost for Wisconsin. But overall, I think we're going to have to wait until that injury report card comes out just a couple hours before kickoff tomorrow.
Yeah, Nick, you're heading to the big house for the game, which I know you're very excited about. What are you going to be looking for in person for this team in terms of just to see if they can compete or not with a top 25 program in Michigan?
Yeah, I feel like, guys, with kind of compared to any game this year, there's been a ton of preview stuff from us coming into this one because we've had the time. And as I said on another show with you, Perko, I feel like if I said that the Maryland game was like the inflection point, and our guy Mac here wrote something similar, I saw in his great 3 C's today, I think this is going to be a potential fortune teller for the rest of the month and potentially the season. And that is not saying that this group has to win. Not saying anything crazy. That would obviously be a monumental victory. Quite honestly, it'd be one of the biggest upsets by the spread in all of college football this year. So that'd be huge. But what I'm looking for is a fast start. And I think I did something similar, Perko, on the show doing this. Jerome Moore and the Wolverines, they love to play smash mouth football. Credit to Wisconsin throughout even a tougher year. They have been able to hold up their end of the bargain on the defensive side. On the D-line, they have been tough, physical, kind of nasty up front. You're obviously going to need that. Number 2, I'm looking for this group to not fall behind early. Obviously, if you lose a ball game, you're going to be behind at some point. But I don't love kind of the idea of having to play from behind. I tend to agree with Mac on the QB situation. I'm not fully ruling out anybody, but I think for Fickell to have said that about Billy, and the fact we get O'Neal again at pressers, the spread isn't moving toward Wisconsin, anything like that. I think you probably see O'Neal. I do think Simmons looked pretty good, but all that said, I don't like the idea of playing from behind against a pretty good defense. Several NFL players, I think they probably have 3 or 4 right now. Not only is it the big house, but they're doing kind of a color-coded maze out type of thing. It's going to be tough. Okay, so that's number 2. And 3, guys, some semblance of a consistent run game. I understand it doesn't get easier this weekend, but you look the rest of the way, as we've all done together, the whole schedule doesn't really get easier. So at this point, it's just about, look, it's going to be a major uphill battle to get to that 6, right? And even, the optimist, that was kind of the big-time win total I said, even if things go well. So nobody went too high with that. I'd love to see 2 or 3 more wins. I think that would be at least a couple underdogs, and you see what happens. But just, without kind of going as far as picking a win, things like that, just making this one really competitive against a good football team that's also coming off a bye. And guys, I don't think this is being discussed much at all. I haven't seen it in a lot of preview stuff really throughout, but Jerome Moore, the head coach, is obviously coming back after kind of the suspension aspect. So a lot going in that favor. I do look forward to seeing how the Badgers respond in my first trip up to the Big House.
Yeah, it should be a fun one. Nick, I'm sure you will enjoy your time over there in Ann Arbor, win or lose for the Badgers, because it is a fun place to visit, no matter what my podcast partner Bernie says and how much he hates that place. But, for the Badgers here, you mentioned getting, the running game going. And if it is three redshirt freshmen on the right-hand side of that offensive line again, it's going to be tough. And to me, one thing I'm definitely going to be looking for are the snaps. I think I'm a broken record with talking about snaps ever since Luke Fickell came into the Badgers' life, because we had issues with Tanner Bordellini and his little pop-up snaps that seemed to take 5 seconds to get from center to quarterback. Renfro was better with them last year, but we've seen Ryan Corey struggle with snaps a little bit. So I'm curious to see what happens there, and that's going to go a long way to getting the run game going on the defensive side of the ball. I think that, like you said, Wisconsin does have a very strong run defense, but they can be passed on. We've seen that a lot. I thought it was really interesting. You guys spoke with Ricardo Hallman earlier this week, and I thought it was really refreshing just to see him take ownership of some of his shortcomings with his play this year. And I think that, he's someone that I'm really hoping to see a bounce back game from. The other thing I'm really looking for is probably more snaps for some of the freshmen, especially Mason Posa, who's come along really nicely so far and is getting more and more snaps, it seems like, every week. Really athletic linebacker who can sort of, really move all over the field. And then I think Nick Clayton is another kid that we're going to want to be watching for, see how many reps he gets, especially in those passing situations. Now, Mason Reiger and Daryl Peterson have both done very well at outside linebacker so far this year. Mm-hmm. The two highest graded defenders by PFF on Wisconsin's roster. So it may be a little bit tougher to get him snaps, but I know they have moved Daryl Peterson inside on third and long situations. So you could possibly see, those three guys playing together on third and long. But in order to do that, you got to get third and long. And that has been tough for Wisconsin to do. But, we'll see what happens with the game this weekend. But I think a lot of buzz in and around Madison these days is around the basketball program. And I think hopes are really high this fall for Greg Gard and company, John. And, as basketball season, nears, I think there's a lot to talk about, John. So what is on your mind when it comes to the basketball program right now?
Yeah, it's a great time to talk about basketball. Probably more so than in past years. Just to me, it's the roster that's been assembled here. There's some veteran guys. There's some guys with a lot of experience, and I think the biggest thing from reading Payne stuff and reading Nick stuff and taking as much as I can is it's a long way down the road. But what is this rotation going to look like? I think it's easier right now to pick out the guys who likely won't be in the rotation. And I think that's Ricardo Greppi and Isaac Gard. And then you're looking at, Nick could probably speak in a little bit more depth to this, but you're looking at 11, 12 guys who could potentially play. 11 or 12 guys are not going to be in the rotation, but there are going to be some really difficult decisions, and spots are certainly not set yet as they, get into the thick of the fall and into the winter. But there are a lot of guys you can make a case for that deserve to play, and how those minutes shake out beyond those starting five, which I think everyone can kind of have a consensus of who they know or anticipate that starting five to be. But the rest of the five or the rest of the six, it's going to be very interesting to see what that pecking order is and who Greg Gard feels comfortable playing, because there's, like I said, I think there's a lot of guys you could make a case for that are able to contribute this year. But look, I think he's going to want to play 8 or 9, and some guys are going to be on the outside looking in there.
I'm really excited to see Hayden Jones, Nick, the kid from New Zealand who's coming over, who did show really well in international play this year. What are your expectations for him?
Yeah, Perko, I'll just take that into kind of a dual point based off what Max said and the freshman class. I think that Hayden physically looks really, really comfortable. I think he can move fluidly, pretty good handler, really good passer, can get to the cup. I didn't see him score a ton when we were at practice, but those are some things he can do. And guys, I'm just not really sure. I mean, I haven't been here forever, of course, but I'm not really sure kind of as excited as I've seen Guard about a young group of guys, because that also includes Kins and Garlock, obviously Hayden Jones, Alexis Bialuskis, even though he's a little bit older and obviously from Lithuania, he's still just a freshman, and they like what they've seen. So what I would say is I think you're going to see a couple freshmen play. But I love the point from Mac that, even checking around the program, talking in the offseason, I think it's been like, hey, this is a good, deep team. Not everybody that maybe is good enough to play or maybe deserves to play type of thing will get into the rotation, just because, you're not going to have 11, 12, even 10 most of the season, right? Then when you get to Big Ten, sometimes that crunches down to like 7 or 8. So it'll be really, really intriguing. If I could just, add kind of something that I saw this week, I was a little bit, again, it's one practice. We know that caveat, but I was a little bit more impressed with Austin Rapp than I even maybe kind of anticipated. We knew he could shoot the rock. I knew that he would be a part of things, likely a potential starter, but I mean, there was a good probably 5-6 possessions. He looked like he could be, and don't think he will be, but could be the best player on the team, just in terms of his shooting in those sequences, right? Handling the ball in transition, which I'm not sure I really saw when I was scouting him. You can see he's got a little bit of a swagger to him, which was cool to see. And, just kind of the overall, I know Mac has read our stuff, but the overall expectations and excitement around this group are something pretty intriguing that are not just coming from the outside.
Yeah, you mentioned Austin Rapp there. I mean, we've got 5 transfers coming in this year, John. Austin Rapp, Andrew Rode, or is it Rode or Rhodey? Rhodey, yeah. Elijah Gray, Nick Boyd, Braden Carrington. Which of those guys do you think will make the biggest impact this year?
I think it's Boyd. He's coming in, he's taking over that point guard spot. And just what that allows then John Blackwell to do, to play off the guard, which I think is, a position is a little bit more comfortable for him, although we saw him handle, those ball handling responsibilities last year. The experience that he brings, he's played in the Final Four, the leadership that I think he's brought right away to campus, and, reading about how vocal he is and how he's moving people around, and just the quickness. I think the coaches have talked about, he's as quick with the ball in his hands as Wisconsin's had for a while. So that element that he brings to the table, I think it's going to take pressure off of, Wisconsin shooters, and then it's going to help those bigs. As he gets in the lane, draws some attention, he can be able to kind of dish off to those bigs too. So I think he'll have the biggest impact, but you could certainly make a case for Rhodey as well. And then I think Rapp was kind of the star yesterday. But I think when you get into the thick of this schedule, as you see this team play a bunch, I think it's going to be Nick Boyd and all the things that he brings to the table, from that leadership position, ball handling position, and a guy that can score the basketball as well.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think that most people think that Purdue is the class of the Big Ten this year. How do you see Wisconsin shaking out, Nick, going into the season? What are their chances at getting a Big Ten regular season title, and how do you see them finishing here in conference?
Yeah, Pergo, great question, and I'll probably be able to give you, even more in the next week or so. I'll be at Big Ten basketball media days for us with Badger247. So getting some deeper looks at other teams. I would agree Purdue is probably the class of the country. I think they have the best roster, at least 1 through 7, 1 through 8, probably in the nation. And then I think it's kind of wide open with teams like Michigan. Okay, they're looked at as a pretty big contender. UCLA did a pretty nice job adding to their talent. Who else is in the mix? Ohio State put a lot of money into their roster, so we will see if they kind of make some moves. Izzo's always a group to watch. Badgers. What I will say is,
I'll add Illinois to that mix. I think Illinois could be good this year as well.
Yeah. No, I mean they're absolutely always good. They had a funny video actually today with like a pronunciation guide for a lot of their roster from Europe, which was a fun watch. But no, I think I feel good about Wisconsin competing in kind of that 3-5, 3-6 type of range like we tend to see. And then maybe taking that deep run into the Big Ten tournament, as we often tend to see under guard at least 4 or 5 times as well. But I just feel like if Purdue can stay healthy, I personally think they might be the best shot at kind of the Big Ten ending that national championship drought, as we've seen for a while. I think these Badgers are going to be a tough out for anybody because of how deep they are. I keep going back to 3 things. Talent, of course. They have the coaching. But again, I do think they're deep. And I think it's a true deep that you can count on 9, 10, 11 guys in spot minutes. You're not expecting everybody to be a star. But that's what I really love. And I haven't been shy before I got to work with you guys, even giving credit to, I think people hit too much on the waiting for a Sweet 16 with guard in this era. I don't think they realize how good this coach is at roster construction. I think he's done a terrific job adapting. I think that you've got a bunch of different skill sets, like Mac talked about Boyd. Rhodey looked good shooting the ball. You've got 2, I'll say the NBA is looking at Blackwell and Winter, so potential pros there. And then just a unique freshman class that I think was maybe a little bit underrated even by some of our team at 247, not the Badgers group. But, it'll be fun to see. I'm just really intrigued to see kind of what this group can do. You return essentially the whole staff. Plus, it's not like this program was lacking energy, but you can feel the energy that Davison brings. Kind of cool. Obviously, we've all watched him play. I was actually a student at the same time, so I know Brad for a while. And it's just going to be cool to see him in this role, too.
One of those freshman names, John, is Zach Kinzinger. We haven't talked about him yet. Do you think he could be a contributor this year, and what role do you see him playing on this team?
Yeah, I mean, he's certainly someone that's in the mix, but he could be one of those guys where, as they kind of get settled here, he's 9, 10, or 11. Again, it's still real early and a lot can happen, but he brings, I had a chance to see Zach a bunch, playing at De Pere and then Team Hero as well. If you look at him first glance, like he can handle the ball, right? And I think that when he's in the conversations that he's had with Greg Gard is, he likely plays a little bit off the ball because he can shoot so well, but he's a guy I think could spell Nick Boyd. He could spell John Blackwell if you needed him to. I think that if you need him to play this year, he'll be ready to carve out some minutes for you. But again, does he leap a guy like Braden Carrington, who might have a similar job description, not necessarily skill set, but I think Carrington, he could play the 1 if you needed him to, play the 2, maybe play as a smaller 3 if you needed him to. So, Jackson Ball, does Jackson Ball eat into some of those potentials at Kinzinger minutes? There's a lot to be sorted out there. But I do think he's a guy that can play. And anytime a guy can shoot, he's likely going to see his way onto the floor, especially with what Wisconsin wants to do this year. There's been talk that they want to get more 3s up this year. So Kinzinger could do that for you. But I really like, it sounds cliche coach speak, but he's a coach's kid, and he plays like a coach's kid. I mean, he is smooth, he's sound, he's in the right spot, he understands tempo, he understands pace. All those things I think made him very attractive to Greg Gard, obviously. So all that said, if you need him to play, I think he'll be ready. But there are some guys to sort through in that backcourt, and I don't know how much you want to take Nick Boyd and John Blackwell out of these games too. Those two are, those 3 and Nolan Winter, talk about maybe a big 3. I think that could be it for Wisconsin too. So Kansas is ready. I think he's ready to go, but we'll see how much he's needed this year.
Yeah, I'm excited to see, a lot of these new faces. Greg Gard has done a really good job in the transfer portal, identifying talent and maximizing their potential. I mean, we saw AJ Storr have his best season at Wisconsin. We saw John Tanji obviously blossom into an All-American at Wisconsin. And so I think Boyd is probably the guy who is going to make that big leap for the Badgers this fall. But I think there's a lot of interesting guys to keep an eye out for. You throw in some of those international players, and this is a really intriguing team. I'm not going to lie, I was out on basketball for a little while there in the in the post Kaminsky era, I guess we'll call it, or I guess we'll really call it, that era. It was a tough watch for a little while, but I think Gard has really turned this program back around, and has proven that he is someone who deserves to be mentioned in the upper echelon of coaches in the Big Ten, just with the way that he has been able to restock this roster and adapt the playing style to a bunch of different players who haven't necessarily had the same skill sets.
Yeah, and his ability to bring in what's worked in the past with the modern version of college basketball, I think is so impressive. And you talked about, Nick and Matt too, the roster construction piece. I mean, it still feels like all the things that made Wisconsin basketball special, like that fans and alumni can lean into, and he's blended it so well with the new world of college basketball. I think it was kind of highlighted in everything that happened with Chucky Hepburn, right? Where this is a significant blow, and you could have, felt bad for yourself, but Chucky transfers out as a potential 4-year starter for you, and immediately you begin to fill those pieces. And Greg, I thought his response to that was excellent at the time. Not to bring up stuff that happened 2-3 years ago, but his response of look, this is just the state of where we are right now. And a guy like losing Hepburn, you could feel bad, you could complain, you could say college basketball's out of control, but his response to it was really appropriate, really sound, and really in tune with what was going on in college basketball. So I applaud him for that, because I think, Matt, some people may have been in your same shoes of, this is a tough program to follow still, and whatever that might be. But he's got Wisconsin, I think, in a really strong and healthy place right now, and he's got really good people around him. I'm curious to see the impact that Kurt Penny's departure has. Brad Davison is great, and he brings a lot to the table, and I don't think anyone's going to match that passion. But Kurt Penny is a more accomplished coach and experience and everything that goes into it. And that's a knock on Brad Davison. Davison will get to that point, but I think Greg was maybe smart in Kurt leaving, but I got Brad Davison, so don't worry about it. So those news kind of colliding with each other was probably strategic, and maybe a good PR person was doing that. But overall, what he's done in the last handful of years, I think has been awfully impressive.
Well, we're into October now, which means we are into the heart of high school football season. So we're going to wrap up here, Nick. I know you're hitting the road this weekend, obviously to Ann Arbor, but that doesn't mean you're not checking in on some prep. So what's on your agenda here for some high school football this weekend?
Yeah, not too far out of the way during the drive, a little bit. But you guys know I do anything for our group, our site. I'm going to swing through Mundelein, Illinois. Montini Catholic and Izzy Abrams take on Carmel Catholic, led by Trey Taylor. So 2 of the top 7 quarterbacks in the nation on the most recent ranking from 247 play within 30, 40 minutes of each other here in the Great Midwest. So pretty cool. Obviously, Abrams was here for a visit. And then as we reported, Mac, that Kenny Guyton went out and saw Abrams during the bye week. So Wisconsin work to do, as we've been saying, but they are still in that mix for, like I wrote, and I felt validated with his new 5-star composite, a program changer and a top 10, 15 player in the entire country. So looking forward to that. Pray the roads are safe, fellas, and I look forward to covering the game for us as well.
John, anything on your radar this weekend, high school football-wise?
We're getting into some playoff clinching stuff, with some teams that are off to a fast start, potentially start clinching some playoff stuff, but no games in particular that kind of stand out to me. I think our team's done a really nice job of hitting up the in-state guys. Some of the guys Nick and I have both got a pair of eyes on, so that's really helpful as we go and discuss stuff on our message board. That's something that I really like about what we're doing right now is, those in-person evaluations, being able to talk to our readers about that, really get in depth with them. And it helps when Nick has seen a guy and I can see him too, and we can kind of share our thoughts about him. So all that good stuff is on the message boards. But I'll be having my eye out high school football if I can stay up. We were talking about staying up late. Hopefully I can stay up and see some of the conclusion of these games, because some of these old guys got to go to bed, right, Nick? Or I'm sorry, right, Matt?
Yes, that is absolutely correct, especially if Especially when the Badgers, and obviously not this weekend, when the Badgers have a night game, there's no way I'm staying up Friday night late because I know I'm going to have a late Saturday night. So, but we appreciate everyone tuning in here to the Badger247 show. We appreciate everyone who's joined us over on Badger247.com, running a promo right now, 50% off to join, to get all that intel on the best message boards around. So make sure you're checking that out over on the site. And until next time, we appreciate everyone tuning into the Badger247 show here. Make sure you're subscribing, liking, rating, reviewing, all that good stuff. Until next time, we'll see you on the boards.